Beep, 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 beep. Welcome to the court of the EDI Jester. What have we got for you now? GenderGP, run by that woman, Helen Wibberley. Right, Webberley. I've got an article which I'm going to pop in the Dubris and you can have a read if you like. Become Warrior Teacher, okay, starting in August. So let's get cracking. I want to see lots of you. And buy me a coffee, please, if you can, or subscribe to my Substack if you could do. That is the easiest way to help me if you'd like to do something to help keep me going. So this was from June 2023, and it's an older article, so it's a couple of weeks old, but I got hold of it and I thought this is really interesting and it's probably worth you considering it as well. Written by a lady called Polly Curtis, and Polly Curtis comes from an organisation called Tortoise Media. Now, not only do I appreciate the word tortoise, I think tortoise is a lovely word, right? But they tend to sort of try and find some common ground with people and try and find a way through things, even though I'm not the individual person to get to do that. Generally, the jester just goes, "You're done, mate," right? So, but let's have a go through it. It's about GenderGP, and it's Inside the World of Private Trans Healthcare by Polly Curtis, in which Polly has a chat with Helen Webberley, and I think it's important for this to be vocalised, okay? So, get yourself a coffee, get yourself a cigarette, right? Or a vape, and let's go. Helen Webberley is in her mid-50s. She's warm and welcoming. When I arrive at her flat in a red brick mansion block in central Cardiff. She lives here with her husband and one of their 5 adult children. I'm expecting her to be wary of journalists given some of the highly public and contentious battles she has fought. One newspaper labelled her one of Britain's most controversial doctors, but over the course of our 4-hour conversation, she is open rather than guarded and passionate rather than clinical in the telling of her story. Webberley trained as a GP, but says she was always more interested in how people felt than in complex diagnosis. Should we just do that bit again quick? She was always more interested in how people felt than in complex diagnosis. I love being the kind of person that will sit on the edge of the bed and hold that person's hand and say, "I understand this is really scary for you, and I'm going to do all I can to help you," she says. The controversy Webberley attracts comes from being the founder of GenderGP, a private online service offering trans healthcare to adults and young people, children as well, mind. She has been locked in a battle with the General Medical Council for several years over how she has treated young people. At one point, she was suspended from practicing as a doctor. Her husband has been struck off for good. I am here to understand the service she offers young people and what is going on more widely in the world of private trans healthcare. One parent of a trans teenager has described it to me as like being in the Wild West. Others say private care is essential in the absence of an effective NHS service. For more than a year, I've reported on the Gender Identity Development Service at the Tavistock in North London. It's the only NHS service in England for treating gender dysphoria in young people, a condition in which a person feels a mismatch between their biological sex and their gender identity. Again, here from Tortoise Media, despite the fact that they're attempting to obviously bring some kind of clarity to this situation, they already base it on the fundamental idea that something called a gender identity exists, which of course we know doesn't. Last July, the then Secretary of State for Health, Sajid Javid, announced the service would close following an official review which raised serious concerns about safety. For Webberley, this has all started in 2015 when a patient who looked to all intents and purposes like a man walked into her surgery in South Wales for a chat. The following week he returned, and this time she noticed they were wearing a bra and pink nail varnish. The next time Webberley saw the patient, she noticed that they had more female attributes. It's not female attributes, Tortoise Media, it's feminine attributes. And I was like, "So you want to take female hormones to grow breasts and things like that?" And she was like, "Yes, that's what I want to do." Webberley, who had no knowledge or experience of treating anyone with gender dysphoria, is that what that was? Did some research and learnt about the adult service at the Tavistock, but she decided her patient, who had never left Wales, couldn't manage the repeated journeys to London the treatment would require. So she prescribed cross-sex hormones. "I just knew it was the right thing to do," she says. Over the course of our conversation, I'm often struck by how many times Webberley is so sure that her instincts are correct. It's certainty that many experts in the field I've spoken to don't share. Webberley says she's always looked for new ways of making money. She's invested in commercial properties, she's bought and sold furniture on eBay. She even created a website to rent out a camper van she owned. In 2015, she was drawn to the burgeoning world of telemedicine and private online practice. She created a website with information on a range of health conditions and added a page for transgender healthcare, based on what she's learned from her treating her first patient. By luck, or algorithmic design, the page snowballed, and soon it was getting thousands of hits a day. So she created a new website for people looking for information about being transgender. She called it GenderGP. As emails poured in, she started to prescribe the hormones her patients said they needed. Did no alarm bells go off? I ask. Not at all, she replies. It just felt fine. It just felt fine. I'm a doctor. I have a medical degree. I have a license to practice medicine. It was immensely rewarding, she says. The fear at the beginning of the consultation and then the joy at the end when they're crying with relief. Just an amazing job satisfaction. It sometimes sounds as if Webberley was intoxicated by this experience. In 2016, she saw her first young person seeking gender healthcare. A 16-year-old emailed her saying they wanted to transition from a girl to a boy. She prescribed them the testosterone they and their mother were asking for. When I asked Webberley whether this was based on an assessment, she replied it was a belief, a confirmation. Webberley describes watching her patients transition. Their emotions start matching their identity. And then when they get their first crack in their voice or their first hair on their chin, it's just like Christmas, she says. Helen Webberley's problem started with patient A, a 12-year-old who was born biologically who was a girl, but had always presented as a boy. This 12-year-old sitting in front of me was the most boy thing I've ever seen, she says. Patient A was already being treated at the Tavistock and had been prescribed puberty blockers. Under the rules of the Tavistock, a young person could not be given cross-sex hormones until they reached 16. Nevertheless, Webberley treated patient A. I knew it was a brave thing to do. I knew it was an unusual thing to do, but it felt absolutely the right thing to do. Complaints about Webberley soon followed. In 2017, the General Medical Council prevented her from practicing medicine over her treatment of patient A and 2 others. In 2008, she got a criminal conviction for operating a medical practice without a license. GenderGP moved its registered office to Hong Kong to escape UK regulations. It's now registered in Singapore. In 2022, Webberley's husband, Dr. Michael Webberley, was struck off by the GMC for what is described as a catalogue of failings in the way he treated young people and prescribed puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. He took on his wife's patients while she was prevented from practicing. The General Medical Council also found he'd failed to adequately assess patients. Then in March this year, the High Court rejected a previous ruling against Webberley, which had found she'd failed to give proper advice to a patient about the impact of hormonal treatment on their future fertility. In that judgment, the judge was clear. Very important bit here. In that judgment, the judge was clear that the decision was in no way a verdict or endorsement of the work of GenderGP. Once more, in that judgment, the judge was clear that his decision was in no way a verdict or endorsement of the work of GenderGP. Throughout Webberley's battle with the GMC, GenderGP has operated without her, using remote therapists and doctors, and now she is free to practice again. GenderGP won't tell me how many patients they've treated since they started. They confirm there are currently nearly 10,000 patients on their waiting list. More than 1,000 of those are below the age of 18. Doctors working for GenderGP prescribe the medication privately. They sometimes work with the NHS GPs to advise on drug regimes. Pharmacists can decline to honour private prescriptions, but GenderGP says it has a network of providers willing to work with them. I've spoken to parents who have accessed these drugs privately and watched as their children's bodies changed over months and felt relieved and happy for them. But plenty of others have concerns. One mother told me how her child was prescribed testosterone by GenderGP after a single hour-long consultation. But there are even more worrying aspects to this story than this. Another told me how she discovered that her teenage daughter was buying testosterone from a drug dealer. When I asked her whether she trusted any of the organisations working in this field, she replied that it was like being in the Wild West. One thing experts in this field tend to agree on is that diagnosing gender dysphoria is difficult. It can't be done in a single session of therapy. At the Tavistock Clinic, a team is supposed to affirm how the child is feeling, then to discover more about that and explore all the issues in their lives, though it didn't always work that way in practice. But Dr. Weberly believes this is a waste. Why don't we believe that they are transgender? And then use those psychologists and counsellors and therapists to help somebody in their journey, she asks. It's clear to me that what GenderGP is offering is hormones on demand. The new national service which replaces the Tavistock is on the way, but it's taken months to agree on the rules it will operate under. They have now been published and they include the stipulation that puberty blockers will only be prescribed to young people as part of a clinical trial. Helen Weberly tells me GenderGP is scaling its operation for even more referrals. Her mission is to help as many trans people as possible. I'm a doctor peddling in business, she tells me towards the end of our conversation. It has to be obvious to anybody with any ounce of sense that what we have here is a medical scandal, the magnitude of which I cannot get my head round, and only find anything that comes even vaguely close to it in studying the history of eugenics, the movement that popped up, which eventually led to some horrific things. Gender identity is personality, gender expression is fashion. There is no such thing as a gender identity. This is a crackers belief system that's captured many people. And I've noticed a few tweets in the last couple of days from people who are examining the connection between the ideation of gender identity and autism. And that's looking very worrying. It appears to be that they are targeting autistic children. And quite frankly, I think the whole damn thing is despicable. The whole damn thing is despicable. I'm very concerned the fact that the NHS think it's okay to put them on trials. It's not. You need to stop this. Overnight. And the application of sort of cross-sex hormones on people needs to be made illegal. I'm sorry. I'm done with it. I really am done. Because all we're seeing is damage. Men breastfeeding babies. Men breastfeeding babies. Damaged teenagers. Damaged teenagers, you know? And if you look at that article closely, and I do urge you to do so, the problem with the article is that it's using the language or the argot. You know, the argot is a language of a particular group. It's an underground term. They're using the language of that group, and in fact that then makes it difficult for them to tell the truth. So we didn't start from the position that gender identity doesn't exist, which it doesn't. I had a big to-do with ChatGPT yesterday till eventually admitted there are only two sexes. Sorry, I got it wrong. Right? And if there's only two sexes, there can only be two genders. Two forms of gender, masculine and feminine. Any rate. Go well, all right, okay? It's deeply worrying that these people are still operating. It's not the only one. There'll be more. We just don't know about them yet. And the NHS is going to cement it, if we're not careful. They'll cement the idea into their clinical practice when the idea should be dismissed utterly. There are only young people with distress. They're either young people with distress, in which case they need help, therapy, or what? What's the rest of them? Who knows? Look under the Stonewall umbrella. You might find the odd eunuch and cross-dresser scurrying around doing things. Right? So, go well. I'll see you later. Thanks so much for listening. Bye.